Welcome back, friends. You're just in time for the Johnny Brew Show.
What's going on, everybody? My name is John Brookhagen, host of the Johnny Brew Show, and welcome to another fantastic episode as we introduce you to Red Wave 22, as we try to take Nevada back, and we do everything we can for the citizens, for the students, and for the great people of this state and this country. And there's a lot going on right now, from preparing for the primaries in June to the election obviously coming up in November, and all the local news that's going on. Most specifically, and you know on the Johnny Brew Show, we like to talk about education most. So if you love knowing more about education, knowing more about our conservative candidates, knowing more about what you can do to get involved to help with this push to get back our freedoms, whether you're talking about vaccines or you're talking about restorative justice, it all falls under the umbrella, and the progressives have had their shot for 15 years here in Nevada, and we're working hard to get the truth out with a little bit of common sense. We have a real treat for you today. There's somebody I've been trying to get on the show for pretty much since the Johnny Brew Show came into existence. It's the group called Power2Parent. All right, they're founded by Erin Phillips and Charlie De La Paz. Today we were actually supposed to have Charlie on the show, but unfortunately she came down with something, and I was going to get mad at her, but I actually did the same thing to her 3 weeks ago. And unlike me, who didn't do anything but call in sick, I was lucky enough to have a replacement, and it's not really a replacement because, again, we've been trying to have Erin Phillips on since the Johnny Brew's inception. So without further ado, let me introduce to you the co-founder and president, I believe, of Power2Parent, Miss Erin Phillips.
Hi.
Is that correct? Are you the president of Power2Parent?
Yes, that is correct.
Beautiful. And how long has Power2Parent been around, and what was the initial goal of Power2Parent?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, there's a couple of co-founders, and I should mention Deborah Earls, another co-founder with Power2Parent. And we started in 2014. We've been around almost 7 years. And there was the issue regarding sex education that came. I was actually a stay-at-home mom. I went to a trustee meeting, my own trustees meeting, and was really shocked with something that they had introduced, in that they said that we had gaps in our sex education. So they brought a group from the East Coast, and it was called CCSD, and I had never heard of this group before. And they introduced it was called Comprehensive Sexuality Education K through 12. And I was surprised that kindergarten was in that manual.
Right, at all, right.
Yeah, like, what are we teaching our kids about sex in kindergarten in a school setting?
Right.
And so then I was just kind of listening and looking through this guide, and I was really surprised with some of the concepts that they wanted to teach our kids. And so as I started asking questions, and also should mention, I was the only parent in this meeting. It was an invite-only meeting, and I happened to get an invite, and I was the only one that had shown up or was invited. I'm not sure, but I was the only parent there. So that was concerning to me. And then when I started to ask more questions about why they were introducing these concepts to our kids, there was a lot of pushback from my trustee and from the district. And so I realized I kind of, found a nerve.
Right.
Yeah. And so I started researching this organization. And as I started to do that, and really understanding this concept of sex education that they were trying to push into our classroom, I realized that it wasn't really about sex education at all. It was really more about social engineering. And the number one problem I saw in the whole thing, I mean, there were so many problems, but the number one problem was the idea that they were circumventing parents, and they wanted to remove opt-in for sex education. And so that became the point of real contention for me, and realizing that we needed an organization that was standing up for parents' rights. And it was clear that this had been happening for many years. And so, but as a mom, and the parents I was talking to were just learning that this was happening. And so we were like, wow, this is really surprising. They've spent a lot of money. Who's spending the money? It's a lot of these sort of progressive left-wing organizations who are pushing graphic sex education, pleasure-based sex education into our classroom for as young as kindergarten.
It's amazing because this is 2014, and these things that you're talking about, I mean, I have a story about book banning that we're going to be talking about ourselves, and that's what's going on in the news when you look at what's going on in the past 2 years, all of a sudden you can't find a seat at the school board meetings. They got overflow rooms with video, and people who are speaking have to be called in from outside because they're so crowded. But it seems like you foresaw all this in 2014, and you even mentioned that in 2014, at that point, you realized that you were already late to the game, that this has been going on for the previous, I don't even know how long, decade or so. And you identify that it's a left-wing or progressive politicians, for lack of a, or movements is a better term, that is pushing this kind of stuff. And you talk about, you said so many things, I just didn't want to interrupt you because you were really cooking. But, you talk about social engineering, which kind of translates to the layman as brainwashing. And, you bring up kindergarten kids. What more do we have to teach them besides boy and girl? And then as I was thinking about just saying, all we got to teach kindergarten kids is there's a boy and a girl. Now realizing that in 2021, they might be adamantly against even saying that. So what are they, what is it that they want to teach kindergarten kids, knowing that they won't teach them, this is a boy, this is a girl?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a whole nother discussion that we dealt with in 2018 here in Nevada in regards to the gender diverse policy. And that was a really intense year because there was a lot of really loud activists that came out that were, working with the Department of Education in Nevada. And then now you've seen it now on a more national stage in the last few years. But really opening bathrooms for students who believe that they're the opposite gender. And in that year, we really pushed that parents should have the right to protect their kids even when they're at school and protect their privacy. And so we pushed for a third option that everyone could use, a gender-neutral option that would kind of solve the problem of
right, like in casinos, you have like a family bathroom with a changing station and a urinal and a tampon machine. It's kind of like could work for anybody and everybody, even to change a baby.
Sure. And
that sounds like an easy solution.
Right. And we want all kids to feel respected, and we want their privacy to feel respected regardless. And we know that, regardless of your opinion on this particular issue, we want to protect kids, even kids who identify as transgender. And so we want to make sure they're protected. We also want to make sure our girls are protected who are changing in the locker rooms for sports and for PE. And so, if you have these kids shouldn't have to navigate these really complicated issues.
Right. And it must make you sick that you've been banging the drum on this since 2014, 2018. Yeah. And then in 2021, some poor girl is getting raped by a dude in a skirt in Virginia. And you must be saying, I've been warning you people about this since 2014. How do you feel about that? Like your group, for example, Power2Parent. Yeah. Have you seen, like you guys were growing slowly and steadily, and then in 2020, all of a sudden you guys took off because you were the foundation that this movement can be built upon?
Well, absolutely. I think parents have woken up since that year. In March of 2020, we had to pivot and really try to decide how we can help empower parents to protect their kids and to advocate for their kids. I mean, that's the mission of this organization, is to empower parents.
Right. Well, the teachers have a union. The administrators have a union.
Exactly right.
I mean, even to a small extent, not enough, students even have some representation, but you never hear about the parents, except for maybe the PTA, maybe for getting the ability to speak at a school board meeting. The parents have been more and more pushed out. Yeah. I mean, I've been looking at the evolution of education a lot lately. And I mean, whether you're talking about from the inception of our country in 1793, when the schools first started becoming public, or you talk about the implementation of progressive policies by, say, John Dewey or Woodrow Wilson, this has been a steady climb towards this. And now I think we're seeing the fruition of us saying silly things like there are no boys and girls, and we need to be educating elementary kids on transsexualness. When I work with even 9th and 10th graders, I tell the kids, your concentration is not on sex. Your concentration is being on a child and growing. And it's one thing to be curious and understand you're going through puberty, but why are we just jamming sex and violence and race relations and all this stuff down our children's throat, even if they're as old as 14 or 15? That's not what they should be concerning themselves with.
Well, I mean, to your point, the if you look at the test scores just in Clark County School District, they're frighteningly low. And so, we have a very high dropout rate. People aren't even seeing, we're starting to see, we haven't even seen the full impact of distance learning, how that has devastated learning in this district. And I've mentioned this a couple of times. I think it's important to remind people that there was a statistic that just came out about a month or two ago that shows that our African American students in this district, in Clark County School District, have a 4% proficiency in math, 26% in reading. And so if we are wanting to talk about issues of equity and we're wanting to really focus on equitable education, then we need to look at that number and say, why is that number so devastatingly low? If we aren't teaching them to read and to do math, they can't get jobs, and ultimately education is the great equalizer.
And that's the thing. That's the one ticket out of poverty is any young man or woman, regardless of race or color or background, if you're in a socioeconomically lower situation, your ticket out of that is through education.
That's right. And we know that for sure.
And we're only applying that to 4% of African American students. Because obviously, I don't know how well you know me, but math is my bag.
Okay.
So if I feel like math is the most important thing to critical and logical thinking. And if only 4% of, you said African American children, but if any child that's not proficient in math is not going to have the ability to unwind these. And then, like I said, we're pushing these highly charged and very complicated political situations on them without giving them the ability to think critically or analytically.
Exactly. I mean, that's one of the things we say all the time is we need to stop. Everyone's very frustrated with critical race theory. That keeps coming up. And, there's a lot of confusion and arguments over what it actually is. What is critical race theory? And I think what we need to just step away from is this conversation about critical race theory and start talking about critical thinking. How do we teach our kids to think critically? How do we give them, a concept, and allow them to form their own opinion based on the information that's available to them? So stop telling them what to think.
And it's crazy that I'm teaching my kids right now about the Socratic Method and Socrates and stuff. And Socrates, his number one thing is, if you want to be smart, admit you know nothing and ask lots of questions. And it just feels like in this political climate, sorry I keep bringing up the word politics and political, but it's just so intertwined now in our education system that, they're telling you not to think for yourself. They're telling you not to, if you question anything, whether you're talking about restorative justice or you're talking about vaccine mandates, you're getting flagged on Facebook. When education was supposed to be about asking tough questions.
And forming your own opinion and making informed decisions. And if you don't have all the information, you can't make informed decisions. There's all these sacred cows now that you can't talk about. You can't talk about them unless you talk about them in a way that is sort of like the accepted viewpoint of the day. And, we've heard from parents whose kids are being bullied at school for their political views and being bullied at school for, their social views.
And it's so crazy to think that kids are getting bullied over politics. I mean, it blows my mind. We have enough trouble with fat shaming and, girls who think they're ugly or boys who think they're, whatever. All these kids have all these little things that they think that everybody notices and probably nobody does. And now they have to deal with politics, and some kids are, making a stand on masks or bringing an American flag or a Black Lives Matter or a gay pride flag. And, these kids are supposed to be worried about, playing manhunt or hide and seek or playing soccer or getting some fresh air, and nobody's getting fresh air anymore.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, and I just want to make, a mention of just the severe mental health crisis that we have in this country as a whole. But our kids are suffering more than ever. And I think part of this is, again, to the point that you're making, is that there's so many landmines for these kids that if they talk about or they step on this particular issue, they don't know how everyone's going to react. They're already in this really awkward age where they're already learning and growing into their bodies and going through puberty and all those awkward things that you 100. Had to deal with, and now they have all this information coming at them, but they aren't allowed, they have to filter it through so many different screens so that they don't get in trouble or hurt or bullied or
and politics has become so tangible that we're all talking about it now, whether you love Trump or love Biden, or everybody's so fiercely opinionated. So these kids are going home, and I mean, just look at us, 20 years ago, you weren't all about politics. 5 years ago, I wasn't. But now it's really on the forefront of all of our minds. So these kids are going home too and hearing their parents yell at the TV screen while they're watching Tucker or Don Lemon or whoever they're watching, and their parents are so polarized that the kids obviously absorb from their parents, and then if another kid is absorbing the opposite political viewpoint, all of a sudden what should be two kids that are buddies, all of a sudden they realize they're diametrically opposed politically, and they're 12 years old.
Yeah.
And then you talk about the students' social situation. I mean, I work with students all day, every day, and I see what the masks are doing. There's nothing that they're not even bringing it up as a concern that these kids, they feel more secure in their mask. They think people are more attractive with their masks. They think their own more attractive with their masks. I know of some parents that are insisting that their children don't wear a mask to school, and the children are stuck there like they're the only kid not wearing a mask. Other parents are saying that the kids need to wear a mask, and I mean, it's just such a awkward situation when the kids should be worried about, oh my God, I'm going through puberty. This is weird. That should be a singular focus. And I have a math test.
Yeah, that's right. No, we're giving these kids too many concepts that they have to try to navigate, and we really, again, we need to bring it back to, can they read and write? Can they do math? Can they get jobs when they graduate high school? Will they graduate high school at all?
Right.
These are the things we need to start focusing. And the reality is every, from the standpoint of Power2Parent, we want to empower parents to advocate for their kids because we believe that parents know their children the best and they have an inherent right to parent their children. And so at the end of the day, if you're, our stance has always been if a parent wants their child to wear a mask to school, they should have the right to make that choice. Right. But they also have the right to choose if it's not the best choice for their child. And for many people, they would prefer their child to not wear a mask to school. And we've created this this like virtue signaling, like you are a bad person if you don't wear a mask.
Or you're a sheep if you do.
And exactly. No, it's true. It goes both ways. And I think we just need to let these kids get back to being kids and learn how to just, again, read, write, and do math.
Well, I mean, you look at our founding documents and the way this country was initially created. We had the 10th Amendment, which said if it's not explicitly written in the Constitution, it's left to the states. And we are a giant, beautiful country with lots of diverging political opinions, racial opinions, societal opinions, and people might feel different in Montana than they do in LA. Or there might be a different part of the pandemic they're dealing with in Montana or LA or Maine or Florida. And to make these blanket statements for all, why are we going to force transgenderism in Montana when maybe they want that in LA? Maybe the parent, it comes to the parents. If the parents believe in certain things that we need to be educating our children about in LA that differs from Billings, Montana, why don't the parents get to sculpt and mold as long as all the schools are simply teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic? And then all the extracurriculars could be based on your locale and what your local governance is.
Well, and I'm a big believer in choice and, states being able to be who they want to be. But,
and even smaller counties and cities.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of brings me back to one of the larger points that we feel like is a parental right is this idea of school choice. Because, I don't think you should go around banning speech. I think that's against what we believe as Americans. We should be expressing diverse ideas. I do believe that as a parent, if you don't particularly like a topic that's being taught or you don't think it's appropriate or you don't think it's age appropriate for your student, you should have the right to say, this isn't working for us at this school and go to another school. And I think that's another issue with especially our low-income families who really have no choices in this city and in the state as a whole. The people who have choices and then we see are having those choices are the people who are making the decisions to stop other families from having those choices. Right. So our lawmakers are saying no to school choice programs and they're kowtowing to the teachers unions.
Right.
And then at the same time they're saying they represent these Black and brown communities, these lower income families, and those are the families who need choice more than ever, and they're stopping them from having it. So that choice to me is the answer to all of the things that we've already discussed.
Right, because even if they're doing that, then we can have our own schools within our city where, all right, this is a school that leans more progressive. Your fourth grade is going to be learning about transgenderism, and apparently some of the country, whether it's 10%, 30%, 50% of the country is for that. By all means. And then you can have another school that says we're just going to be working on the basics of education and academics, and you can talk about God or morals or racism at home, because we're only going to be concentrating. I mean, we should have that choice. And when you mentioned school choice, a couple of weeks ago was School Choice Week here in Nevada.
Yeah.
Valeria Gurr has been a frequent guest on the Johnny Bruce Show, and we also went to the school choice event here in Vegas, not in Reno, and it was a great event. Have you worked with Valeria Gurr, who's with School Choice Nevada, I believe is the name of her organization?
Yeah,
and,
Nevada School Choice Coalition.
Nevada School Choice,
Yes.
there we go.
Yeah, exactly.
And so have you worked with Valeria?
Yeah.
And what kind of progress have you guys made? How long have you been working with her?
Yeah, so gosh, I don't know how long we've worked together, but we both obviously overlap and feel really passionately about this idea of allowing families to have choice. If you were at that school choice fair, you saw it was an extremely diverse group of families that showed up at that event, and you know, there's always sort of this idea.
And not that I'm counting, but I would say there was a majority of people of color or African American students
Yeah.
there. I mean, like,
a lot of Hispanic, I talked to a lot of Hispanic parents and, people who were, we fortunately have someone that speaks Spanish on my board and was there to help with, translating, because I unfortunately do not speak Spanish. I wish I did. But I think we had a lot of Spanish speaking parents that came to our table and were saying very similar things, which is, I don't want my kids to learn these specific topics that they're learning at their school. We want to choose where our kids go to school and what they learn. And, I think what happens is a lot of these families get spoken for by legislators and by lawmakers, and they're not saying, and they're not representing what the parents want and what they believe.
And not to paint a whole race with a broad brush, because I'm kind of against that, but in general, Hispanics tend to be very religious.
Yeah.
And they got this thing called machismo in Central America and Mexico, and I don't know how on board they are with transgenderism, especially in the classroom, and taking out morals and God. I mean, I understand that we can't have the 10 Commandments on the front door of the school. Not that I don't think that wouldn't be the worst idea, but yeah, they tend to say that Hispanics are going to be all on the liberal ticket, or more specifically the progressive ticket. All Hispanics are going to be Democrats, and even more so with the African American community. And are you finding that that's going to no longer be a shoo-in guaranteed vote for the Democrats?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think if we even looked at the numbers from the last election, that was true. We saw a huge change in, the demographics of how people voted. And, I mean, I think that's definitely true. And I do think, to your point, a lot of our Hispanic families, and I think even African-American families, are more conservative on the side of their faith and family values. Right. And so, I don't think, I guess the point of that really is to say it's not one size fits all. And we can't lump people together, and racialize everything.
Exactly.
Right?
And that's why I don't even like to say that, but but I always say, if you break down people, I'm part white, part German, part Japanese, I'm a man, I'm straight, I'm married. And as you keep breaking me down, you get me, an individual. Yeah. You know what I mean? We have lots in common, we have lots not in common. Right. And it comes down to being an individual. Much more important, your faith and your friends and your family and your patriotism is so much more important than your race and who you sleep with.
Well, and I will say, I'll break it down even further, is when we talk about our kids, I have 5 kids. And so, all of my kids are very different, different. They have different challenges. They have different needs. They have different learning styles. I have a mixed race family. And so, for our family, there are, one school or one program is going to work for one kid and it's not going to work for another kid.
Right. And then when people blame the parents or blame their upbringing, and you say to them, well, look, these 2 kids are twins. Yeah. And one is a straight A grade student and the other can't seem to focus at all. Yeah. Just because your parents were one way, or your brother or your siblings, but yet you get lumped in with your neighbor or your race, or all white people must think like you, and you're thinking, I don't even think the same as my sister, much less every other white person that happens to be in the world. That's
right. And we are so focused on testing, and we're so focused on grades, and a lot of times we don't see, is there actually growth in their learning, Right. And so it's not just education as a whole can't be one size fits all, but that's what we've been doing for many, many years. Traditionally, this sort of lumping kids together in a classroom. If you get a little too behind, it's kind of, you're sorry about that. We're going to pass you on. And then if you're ahead, there's very little opportunities for you to actually grow and move ahead. And I think parents have really woken up, especially to this idea that their kids, they need more options. They need more choice. They need more innovation in education. And if anything good has come out of 2020 and distance learning and seeing what a failure it was, I think this is going to be the best, this explosion of school choice options.
Delivered a red pill to every home in America.
And you call it red pill, I call it choice.
Right.
However you want to frame it. But I do think parents are, from all walks of life, from every political party, if you stop a parent on the street and you say to them, who do you think knows your kid best? Who do you think should decide where your kid goes to school? And who do you think should you have the freedom as a parent to direct their education? And every parent is going to say yes to that. That's a total no-brainer. It's very nonpartisan.
And every politician will also say that they got the child's best interests at heart. But all you got to do is ask your legislator, what is the name of my child?
Yeah.
And if they can't name your child, how can they quite possibly have your specific child's best interests at heart? More so than you, especially. You brought up another point. You were kind of founded on these graphic novels or something that you believed shouldn't be part of the school, and you realized parents weren't being represented a lot. It's happening all over again. For example, there's a book, I believe the name of it is Mouse, that is one of those graphic novels about somebody's experience during the Holocaust. And I haven't read the book myself, but from what I've heard of the book, it is a very good, important book for a mature person to read, to really seem to take the shoes of somebody who was going through that, as opposed to reading a history book, which is kind of like an overview of what happened. This is an actual experience. And while it is a very good book to do what I was just saying, there is apparently some nudity, or a mouse is nude or told to take off their clothes, and there's a lot of four-letter words and bad language. So some parents at a middle school, I think it was in Tennessee, said, I don't think we should have this book teaching our middle school students. We still need to teach the Holocaust, but can we find something else that isn't going to encourage bad language and stripping, taking off your clothes? And now progressives are screaming that Republicans are all about burning books. And, and like you said, I think the book was Big Home that you initially... Fun Home,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Fun Home that you were initially trying to ban, in a school. What is your response to people who are saying that I thought we were for free speech and now you're trying to ban books?
Yeah. So, of course, that's the accusation that we always hear, is that we're trying to ban books. But what's actually happening, and I think is what's happening in this other school district, is parents have not been given the opportunity to review these books ahead of time, and they're being given to students who are not really mature enough to handle the concepts yet. This particular book, Fun Home, we looked it up, the reading level that it was recommended for, and it was college level. But it was being given to 10th graders that were, we're talking 15-year-olds.
Right.
And so, the parents weren't given the opportunity to look at the book ahead of time, and it wasn't vetted, in a way that was, is this an age-appropriate book? And so when a parent, took that to the teacher, there was a lot of pushback too, on, whether or not the student should be able to give an alternate assignment. And so what our question was why is a teacher, and essentially this book, and I'm not as familiar with the book you're talking about, but this book was very graphic. It was also a graphic novel. It depicted sex acts. It was a lot of nudity, and it was a lot of social justice sort of issues in there, anti-Christian themes, so a lot of just big concepts and a lot of pictures that were basically porn. Right. And so no, we aren't for banning books. We are for giving kids access to books that are appropriate for their age and their reading level and their grade level, and then also making sure parents have the opportunity to see these books and decide, is this appropriate for my child? If you are going to present a pornography to a student, if you have an adult teacher,
Hustler magazine.
Yeah.
Can I have, as a 9th grade high school teacher, can I have Hustler on my, or Playboy on my desk?
Yeah. Why is that an appropriate conversation for an adult teacher to have with a student anyway? Why are we having these really, in these graphic, sexually based conversations with an adult who is not your child's parent?
Right.
To me, that's grooming. And
I was going to say, doesn't that at least open the door to grooming?
Absolutely.
I mean, maybe one teacher could have all good intentions.
Sure.
But if you get a teacher with bad intentions, I mean, why not just, give them all the tools they need to do what they need to do to brainwash or groom or...
Yeah, and so I think when you're talking about concepts that are for, older students, and to your point, if that's something that as an older student you feel like they're ready for that concept, right. And as a parent, you are willing to sign off on that, that's your choice as a parent, but they're not even giving the parents the choice.
Well, let me lob you a softball. You ready? Here we go. What is the solution? I mean, some people say we got to get rid of Mark Twain because he uses the N-word and there's some antiquated views on race relations because it was written over a century ago. You got other people saying that we shouldn't have sexually explicit or pro-trans or pro-LGBT curriculum in maybe not high school, but especially in middle school or elementary school. You have other people saying that this or that should be taught, shouldn't be taught. What is it? I mean, again, we are a society of diverse opinions. What is the solution to you wanting to get rid of Fun Home?
Yeah.
And, me wanting to get rid of Mouse and No Racism in Schools wants to get rid of Mark Twain. What is the solution to this?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, we're talking about classics, right? So classic, novels that have been accepted and we've learned from for many years. And when you hear, when we go back to critical thinking, when you hear things like using the N-word and concepts of slavery, should we be teaching our kids about that? Should they be learning the real history? Well, all the people I have heard who you mentioned think we should be teaching those things and
on both sides,
learning about real history, right? And so, I mean, that doesn't mean we're not glorifying it. We're having critical thinking conversations about why these things happened, why they are currently not acceptable, right? So we're talking about classic novels. That's really different than talking about graphic novels. So we're talking about essentially comic book pictures of, we're dumbing down, of sex acts. I mean, so we're not comparing apples to apples, in my opinion, and when we're talking about those two things. But secondly, we worked with the district when this happened to come up with a way that is, appropriate to vet these books so that parents do have the opportunity to know what is being taught and decide what's appropriate. And we think that there should be, more eyes on the books that are being offered to our kids, because adults, there's a reason why we have adults and children. Like, we need adults to set the boundaries for our kids.
For example, when my son was first born, they said, read to him every night. And I think, there's a study, you need to hear 3,000 words a day, and the kid's going to be smarter than if he hears less than 3,000 words a day or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have to, I wanted to read to him every single night. And I read to him Edgar Allan Poe. And it was some dark stuff, you know what I mean? But I was just reading because I thought it was interesting for me to enjoy, and he could get his 3,000 words, and it's a great author, and big words, and good prose, and poetry, and stuff, and I could 100% understand that another parent would think that that's not good, and that's fine, and then you could read, whatever else you want to your children, you know what I mean? But I'm a parent, and I think and now my son's 18, I think I did a good job, and he's not, mass murdering anybody because he listened to Edgar Allan Poe when he was 6 months old. But I mean, even when we get back to it, I mean, you might get some blurred lines. Or what is a classic? I think this graphic novel is a classic. Just because it was written in 1998 and this was written in 1898 doesn't mean that Mark Twain is a classic and this guy drawing these pictures isn't a classic. I mean, that's where I believe it just goes back to the parent. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you live in a community that believes the classics, How to Kill a Mockingbird or Huckleberry Finn, is important. I read it when I was a kid, so I want my kids to read it. You could do that. And if you are in another school and you say, no, it has the N-word, and the majority of the parents say, no, we don't want the N-word, but we are pro-LGBTQ or whatever the acronym is, I want that in it. I don't understand why we don't just go back to the community and the parent and let them help decide.
Yeah, I mean, we know that the number one indicator of success for kids in school is parent engagement. So if our parents are not engaged, or if we're being told on one hand, you guys, you're not a teacher, you don't know, leave it to us to pick your curriculum, you stay away from here, you shouldn't have a say in what we're teaching. And then on the other hand, when we're saying we want our kids back in school, distance learning is bad for our kids, this isn't working, then we're being told, oh, you guys just want babysitters, you just think we're babysitters. So
and then I can piggyback on that, and then what happens when the kid is misbehaving or failing the class?
Right.
How come you're not more engaged in your child's education?
That's right.
They're begging the parents for help, and
That's right.
So which one is it?
That's right. So we need to empower parents to educate, to be a part of their child's education and to advocate for their kids' education. And so I think it has to be, and I believe that teachers are also professionals and they should be treated as such. So, but we have to have this, this marrying of that relationship where the parents are engaged, where they know what's being taught, so they can have those from, school to home conversations, and they can either reinforce those things and those concepts at home, or they can have critical thinking conversations with their kids at home about the concepts. Right. Because again, the goal at the end of the day is to get our kids to be critical thinkers and adults who can function in the world and in society.
Right. And if only 4% of kids are proficient in math,
right,
they're not critical thinking.
That's right.
And they're not going to be able to function well in society. Especially, I'll tell you, if they're not proficient in math, they're not going to be able to give you your change. If you give them a $20 bill and the cash register breaks down.
Right.
And then I also noticed, is Power2Parent more localized, or is this a national group?
Yeah, well, we started here, obviously in Clark County. We kind of spread throughout the state, so we're have groups all over Nevada. But we did actually in 2020. We've helped many parent groups over the years,
like consulting and stuff like that.
Exactly, yeah. Have wanted to kind of go further and establish Power2Parent as a national organization. And in 2020, we actually were able to launch our first national chapter of Power2Parent. Actually, it was 2021. Sorry. So a little over a year ago, we launched our first chapter. So we are right now currently in 5 states, including Nevada.
What states are you in?
We have Arizona, Idaho, Florida, Maryland, and Nevada.
And was Florida the second one? I think I remember when you guys went to Florida.
I think Florida was the first one, actually.
Besides Nevada.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Yes.
Right. That's what I meant by saying. Yeah. And
yes.
So I remember when that happened. I think I sent you guys a little congratulations.
Yeah.
But the reason why I asked is because I also noticed you guys aren't big fans of the teachers union. Now, here in Clark County, we have CCEA, which isn't necessarily affiliated, because when I was working for CCSD, they were, and they broke up, and the NEA, the CCEA, they all had their big infighting, which it seems like they're all pushing for the same thing, but they're fighting amongst themselves for power or money or whatever it is that their main focus. What is your experience with the union, and why have you been a critic of them?
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, I think that we saw really clearly in 2020 that it was the influence of the teachers unions that were continuing to keep our kids from being on campuses in this state, and especially in Clark County. So, we had a whole plan that we were trying to help implement. I was a part of the task force to do that with Clark County School District, on how to get our kids back on campus. And then right in the 9th inning, that was ripped away, and then we pivoted to distance learning. And so, we've seen the fallout of that. It just was very clear that the unions have a very outsized influence on the policies that affect our kids. And again, to your point, to contrast that, parents are the ones that should be helping drive those decisions and make those decisions.
Right, and the teachers union is the one who's
and
driving
they're 100%. And we know that there's a lot of money that goes to teachers unions, and a lot of that money unabashedly goes to help elect people, and those people are very beholden to the teachers union. And so instead of representing the parents, the families, doing what's right for the kids, they are representing the union's interests. And so, we do not have a child-centered district. We don't have a district that's focused on what's best for kids.
Obviously.
It's very adult-centered. And
Obviously.
and you can see that if you just watch a school board meeting. How often are we actually solving problems that are directly affecting our kids every day?
And we've been covering the school board meetings for the past year here on the Johnny Bruce Show, and every single meeting I talk about how there's no concentration on academic. We're talking about anti-racist curriculum, anti-racist behavioral procedure, and or coronavirus mandates or vaccine mandates, and the infighting between the washwomen on the school board. When they are never ever talking about aptitude, ever.
Yeah, and if you look at growth, student growth, and those types of numbers, we've seen the dumbing down of the grading policy, which essentially sort of sweeps under the rug the fact that there is very little growth happening in
Right,
among
and
our
I
kids.
know I failed a senior. He was taking geometry for the second time, and he needed to pass it in order to graduate, and he didn't do any work at all. And I tried everything I could, but he failed. He didn't do any of the work. He failed. I'm so sorry, you're not going to graduate. A month later, walking across the stage. And we still rank 49th, which is based on graduation rates and such. If we're like last because of our graduation rates and because of our aptitude, and then you see that they're forcing kids to graduate that don't deserve to graduate, the problem is way worse than it even seems. And like I see it firsthand in the schools.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's a problem that we're going to solve today, but I also want to go back to the fact that I think a lot of teachers have also realized that their money is going to a union that doesn't actually represent them either. And we know teachers are really unhappy. They're leaving the district in droves. We always have a deficit of teachers, but this has become, almost at an emergency sort of crisis level.
We're at critical.
Yeah, I mean, we had to close down the schools for 5 days because of staffing shortages.
And with all due respect, that was the only time I ever supported the closing of schools.
Yeah.
I mean, Omicron was wiping us out. And if half the school teachers are sick, let's shut down for 3 days. Let's get everybody better and then come back to school, because we really needed a couple of days for the teachers to get better. And then obviously natural immunity. We're not going to have to worry about that for at least a year, if not longer. And, but closing the schools when nobody was sick, closing the schools for kids who were never, ever at risk in the first place was crazy.
Yeah, we've become so myopic in our focus on COVID and on mitigating, the risk of COVID, that we forgot about every other health problem, mental health issue, all of our low-income kids who are failing school and dropping out, and so many enormous issues that have just kind of been pushed to the wayside because of, and I will bring this back to the teachers union, because of the teachers union focus on this idea of safety and risk reduction in this very endemic, we've seen very endemic now disease.
Right.
We have all of the tools that we need to mitigate COVID risk. We have all the tools that we're ever going to have. And so at this point, we have got to stop being so narrowly focused on that. But I do think that so many teachers are also realizing that the teachers unions don't actually represent them.
Well, because they're going to the doctor and the doctor says, you don't even have health insurance and you owe me $11,000 from all your visits last year.
That's
don't even think of coming back here until you pay me that $11,000.
Yeah.
And these teachers are saying, I took this low-paying job because you guaranteed me the best health insurance in Las Vegas, and now you can't. It changes by the day. I don't even know what insurance does, but like you're part of an HHP, and then they're a COA, and they don't even know their codes and what prescription plan they're on, and they're saying it's like absolute anarchy. And then all of a sudden they said like $45 million is missing, and then they're going to get rid of that board without finding the money first. And, I mean, you're talking about dozens of millions of dollars. That's you're talking about teachers' lives. And during this pandemic, does teachers union, whether you're talking about the NEA on a national level or you're talking about CCEA here in Clark County, they're screaming teachers' health, teachers' health, teachers' health. That's why we need to close the schools. But meanwhile, the teachers can't even go see their doctor or their gynecologist, but they want to close down schools. Meanwhile, in Sweden, they never had a mask for the kids. They never closed down schools, and there has been zero consequence due to them just going about business as usual and only protecting those that are older 65 or overweight or whatever predilections have led to people suffering from COVID.
Yeah.
It's really sad. And then what do you know, only because I talk about this a lot and I don't know a lot about it, but I know there's something fishy going on, not only between CCEA and CCSD, but also with Vegas PBS. Do you have any opinion on Vegas PBS, the way they run? I don't know if you understand like the CUs and the way educators get their raises. So then you have to buy courses from Vegas PBS in order to get your raise from CCEA.
I don't think I'm qualified to talk about that, honestly. Yeah, that's probably a little bit above my pay grade. But I do think that that teachers don't feel like this union, whether it be CCEA or NEA or all these other unions, I don't think that they feel like they're actually helping them in a lot of ways or representing their needs in a lot of ways.
All right.
Yeah.
And you were bringing up your situation with in August when you were trying to open the schools and they pulled the rug out from underneath you and just said, oh, no, we decided that's that.
Yeah.
Do you have the other one first, the one where they were protesting in April? I think it's the next one. No. Oh, it's one of them. Oh, is that it? Oh, great. I'm sorry. My bad. I didn't know it was on Fox 5. Play tape.
Spoke to said distance learning is just not working out for them. They talk about having to stay home from work to be with their kids so they can go to school, or having kids in different grades and different age groups and that being a challenge. Those same parents acknowledge that distance learning may be working for others, but they say they want the opportunity to have the choice to choose for their children. They stood along West Sahara Avenue in triple-digit temperatures, holding signs and holding their children.
We've got a kindergartner just starting school, a second grader and a fourth grader, all coming to a new school where they don't know their teachers or any of the principals or anybody at their school. So it's been a really hard challenge for them.
Parents who showed up to the protests say distance learning is not working.
I have 3 children in the school district. It was a struggle before the pandemic, and we can't breathe at home.
Protest organizers, parents, and students say they want to go back to school full-time or at least part-time.
I'm hoping that we could make hybrid classes for parents that want, some time in school.
I think the biggest thing is just making sure that our kids are growing and developing, right? And so, the social aspect of that is huge.
It's sad, it's disappointing. I think we should at least have a choice in order to go to school. Give the parents a choice, give us a choice.
That's what life's all about, choices. We right now don't have a choice.
We know that there's always risk. We're not saying there's no risk involved. We're saying we can make this work with safety measures in place and protect the most vulnerable teachers as well as the most vulnerable kids.
Nevada State Senator Scott Hammond stood with parents who want their kids back in the classroom.
I also believe that it should be their choice.
And parents say the district has largely ignored their wishes. They say with safety measures in place, they feel their kids will be safe back in the classroom.
And that was back in August. I just wanted to highlight, you got some screen time and you got to tell everybody. You could see you were able to get quite a bit of people at 3 different locations, I believe it was.
So we've done a couple of different rallies. That one was the first one that we did when we were really trying to get our schools back open, and we announced our parent union. The most recent one we did, we talked about whether or not parents should have the choice to decide whether their kids should go to school with masks. We did 3 of those all over the state. We had about 700 plus parents there, and the news was reporting that we had 200 or 300, but so a little fake news there.
Yeah, it's funny because even in Washington, when there's an anti-abortion rally with 1,000 people, they frame it to make it look like a lot of people. And then you have 100,000 people at an anti-abortion rally, and they're like, oh yeah, a couple dozen people showed up. Yeah,
well, we got our numbers from Metro actually. So we had Metro give us a number, and they actually said it could have been up to 1,000 at one point. So,
right.
So we were being modest, was saying about 700.
And that's beautiful that you're able to mobilize so many parents, and you have so many parents in your corner. But let's get to some more recent news. We talk about restorative justice here on the Johnny Bruce Show and how even if teachers and administrators wanted to do the right thing to provide a safe learning environment, they're forced to keep these habitual offenders. I mean, you see what's going on, for example, in New York, where they're having bail reform and criminal justice reform. People are getting let out of jail on a couple $100 bail, and then they're killing somebody when 5 years ago they'd remain in jail. Well, the same thing is going on here at our schools, where people who are students who are getting in trouble in school, who would be at a behavioral school or expelled or at a minimum suspended, are going right back into school. And I believe that's a definite reason for what we're seeing here. You want to play a tape? This is at Chaparral.
Story tonight, a shooting just outside of Chaparral High School in the east part of the valley. 3 people were shot, including 2 Chaparral students. 13 Action News reporter Abel Garcia is live from close to where this shooting happened. And I know this is just a tragic situation. I know you talked to some parents, Abel.
Yeah, Tricia, most certainly. Since we first arrived here around noon, I mean, it's been a very hectic and difficult situation, not only for those parents, but also for those students and for these neighbors here near Chaparral High School. And now Metro Police is telling us, and they say that this shooting happened near the school and it left 3 people who were shot. And now 2 of those people that were shot actually go here to this school themselves. And as of now, Metro and CCSD police are still trying to investigate what exactly happened. Metro says calls of shots fired came in at 11:43 this morning, and 3 people were taken to the hospital with gunshot wounds. Again, 2 of them were students at Chaparral High School. Around this time, school police placed the entire school on lockdown, and one student tells me teachers and students were running around frantically and pushing kids into classrooms to keep everyone safe.
At first, I was a little scared because I was like, oh, I don't know what's gonna happen. Like, I didn't know if it was outside because they said it was a lockdown, and at first, that's what I heard. And then, as the hours started to pass by, they would start giving us news, be like, oh, some, teenagers got hit. I was like, oh, shoot.
Now students were released from that lockdown around 2 this afternoon. And now Metro also mentioned earlier this morning there was a fire close to the school and students were evacuated from the school and brought back inside. And now it's still undetermined whether or not this school evacuation and also this school shooting that was near the school was particularly did they have anything that got involved, or were they coincide with each other? We continue to discover and find out more information about the situation. Right now, so far, they continue to investigate. That is CCSD police, as well as Metro Gang Unit. They continue to investigate what exactly happened. And of course, we also talked to some parents and some more officials about this entire situation and how hectic this was overall. And of course, Sean Delancey will have that information for you very soon. But for now, Tricia, I'll send it back to you.
Why don't you send it back to me there, Josh? Is that his name? What was his name? I don't think it was Josh. But my biggest concern is, like, even you see the interview with the student. I grew up in New York, and there's been shootings in New York, a couple. But if there was a shooting by my school, we'd be like, holy cow, I mean, this is like great. I mean, oh my God, there's shooting outside the school. And I grew up in a city where, it wasn't like, oh my God, there's no crime at all.
Yeah.
And you see these kids that are just, oh yeah, I heard there was a shooting and a lockdown. I was thinking, oh man, this is crazy. It seems like it's almost normalized at this point.
Yeah, that's heartbreaking to me.
And just to piggyback, I'm going to ask you to comment on it, but here's another story just from this week that happened here in CCSD. Play tape.
A Las Vegas school student is punched in the head more than 30 times in the middle of a classroom. Now, this disturbing video is making the rounds on social media, leaving parents across the valley in shock. And Abel Garcia is live outside of Las Vegas High School with what the district is saying about all of this. Abel.
Tricia, let me just tell you that when some of these parents and these students and these teachers watched this video, all they could tell me that they were shocked, and some of them even outraged just to see what was happening inside of this video. Some very disturbing images inside there as well. And I want to let you know right before we hop into that video that this video and this content may be disturbing for you to watch, but we want you to take a listen firsthand.
Stop, get off of her.
Now, parents have been posting this video all over social media, raising concerns and bringing awareness to this incident. Now, the video shows a girl being punched in the head repeatedly by another girl in a classroom full of kids that were also watching. Now, someone in the video, possibly a teacher, tells a student that is punching the other individual, stop, 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 while extending their arms to her, but the girl does not stop. She keeps going, and that person just continues to take those punches. Now, when the attacker keeps going, you could hear some laughter from the other students in the classroom, and the graphic video of the punches lasts around 18 seconds. About 8 seconds in, the girl being attacked stops. She lifts her head to protect herself, and her head lies on the desk.
After watching that video, I don't know, I feel weird. I was like, oh my God, Like, I was just like, I couldn't watch it no more after that.
You could hear the punches in the video and how loud they were, and she just didn't stop.
Now, we did also hear from CCSD, and CCSD in a statement says they are investigating every reported case of bullying and takes appropriate action if needed. Now, they are unable to discuss the individual students' disciplinary matters due to privacy laws. However, in general, students can face administrative disciplinary action at school or be referred to law enforcement for possible criminal prosecution, depending on the severity of the matter. Now, I also had the opportunity to speak to some of these students while they were exiting the Las Vegas high school, and they were telling me that they are just shocked, and they did hear about this fight themselves. They said that they witnessed this individual get beat many times, and they also told me that they heard that that individual was then taken to the hospital. Another student also said that she even had a seizure before she was taken to the hospital. Again, we're continuing to hear more about the situation, learning more and trying to understand exactly what happened. Now, again, these students say that normally this doesn't happen here at the Las Vegas High School. This is a very rare occurrence. They don't see many of those fights happening here on campus for the most part. Now, for those parents that I spoke to, they are just telling me that they are outraged, and they're hoping that CCSD takes this situation very seriously and takes the appropriate measures to make sure our kids are safe in our schools. Reporting live from Las Vegas, Abel Garcia, Action News.
Thanks, Abel. Hey, you notice the same guy covered both stories. We reached out to him last minute to see if we could get more of a feel of what parents and students were saying off camera. I'm hoping that we still hear from him and can follow up on that next week. Besides the obvious violence and disgustingness of the video we just saw, my biggest concern is the kids behind them are either ignoring it, they're minding their own business, or they're laughing, or they're recording it. Whether that was my friend punching the person, that was my friend getting hit, or it was just a classmate, I would have tackled the person and broke up the fight. And there's 30 people in a room while this girl is possibly getting beaten to death. They said she had an epileptic seizure. She could easily have a brain hemorrhage or lose her eyesight or get brain damage. Or if you get hit in the back of the skull at the right spot, boxers have died from that, and they're some of the toughest people in the world. Yeah. You know, what is your reaction when you see that this is going on in our schools and you've been screaming for 8 years to save our children?
Yeah, it's devastating. I mean, you know, as a mom, I have children in this age. You know, I have a 15-year-old, and I showed this video to my 15-year-old because I was just completely I'm disgusted that
nobody. And what was your 15-year-old's
reaction? He said to me, well, am I allowed to put my hands on a girl? Is actually what was his first question. I said,
and that's the first question the teacher's asking. And a teacher says, the same, am I allowed to break this up? You know, teachers are told, just call security and stay away. There's no way that could happen in my classroom and me not tackle it. I don't care if I lose my job.
I agree.
You know.
I can't believe that a teacher, and I think you can see the teacher in that video. I've watched it a couple of times, and standing in the back of the room doing nothing, to me, that is just, it's unfathomable to me. And to say, oh, they don't want to lose their job, or they're like, you are an adult. How could you ever stand by and watch another girl get attacked and do nothing? So I'm disgusted by the video. I'm devastated that those kids didn't know what to do and they didn't do anything to help that girl. And I think it's shocking. There's no other word. It's shocking.
And it's the desensitization that these children have. I mean, a girl, like I said, is getting beat to death. And I also noticed all the calculators and all. So right away, I knew this is a math class. This isn't even like some kind of like in-school suspension. I mean, this is a regular math class at a regular high school here in CCSD with a regular girl sitting there trying to do her work, and you could see she started to hurt her hand from the punches, so she moved her hand so she could absorb the hits with her head, and she's laying down, her head keeps banging the table as she's getting pounded, and that would hurt me a lot. I mean, this is a 13-year-old, 14-year-old little girl.
Yeah, it's awful. Looked unprovoked, whether it was provoked or not, it doesn't matter. And I think that we have to take and CCSD should take a hard look at that and say, how does this happen in our schools? What do we need to do? What training needs to happen, to stop this from happening? I obviously feel like it's a character problem as a culture.
I agree.
Training or no training, it just seems like a natural instinct to step in and protect someone,
a fellow human being.
Absolutely. So there's so many problems with that video, and it's just awful. But I think parents, I would say you absolutely need to show this video to your kids and discuss it with them and ask them, what would you do in that situation? And if they don't know, you tell them what you think they should do in that situation.
I pray my son would have tackled him.
Absolutely. And I mean, I pray my kids would do the same thing, even though my son was questioning, I don't know if I would do, because I don't know if you can tackle a girl or whatever he said, which is, a good instinct to have on some,
level.
On some level. But I said, he's like, would I get in trouble or suspended? I said, who cares?
Right.
And I'll come and make
sure. And your
sure.
son still didn't know what to do. After 10-minute conversation, they're still lost.
Yeah.
This is a split-second decision
That's
you have to
right.
make. And maybe those kids froze, and it's not that they're indifferent.
But parents need to have the conversation is the point.
What we talk about, if you hear a gunshot, if you see a fire, what do you do? We talk to our kids about these things. Now we're going to have to add this to the conversation. What do you do what if somebody's kicking a dog on the curb? What do you do?
But they shouldn't have to navigate this type of violence at school.
It goes back to what we were saying.
Point. Yeah, and as a parent, if you are a parent whose child goes to that school, this girl who was hurt, for example, where is she going to go after this? Is she going to go back to that school? If I was the parent, I would say no way. But she needs another option and another place to go. And this brings this conversation back to school choice. And if I can even mention, because this is something that we're working on really hard right now, and
tell me you're going to tell us about the ballot initiative you guys
that's exactly
are starting.
right. And so I want to talk about that because it's so important, and it brings all these things together.
Tell everybody about it.
Yeah, so we filed a PAC. It's called Education for Nevada PAC. On Monday, we filed 2 ballot initiatives, a constitutional ballot initiative and a statutory ballot initiative. And the idea is that if you are in a failing school or you're in a school where your child is not safe, that you as a parent will have the option to take some of that funding that is going towards education and take your child and find a different option that is not failing your child. I think parents have to be able to give their kids the education and put them in a safe environment and go to a place where they're not failing and it's not 4% proficiency in math. They have to have those options. Parents like this family need to have that option. We should never be settling with putting our kids in failing schools. And so the idea of the ballot initiative is that we can allow some of our funding that we have going towards our students' education can follow the child. We should be funding our kids, not these institutions, not the districts that are failing our kids. That money should be able to follow the child. And in doing that, we know for sure in other states, we have the data that when you have robust school choice programs, that the kids who remain in the public school seats, their test scores go up. And the reason is because there's competition for those kids.
Right. I tell the kids all the time, you're not in competition with the kid next to you.
Right.
Even if you have the best grade in your school, does not mean that you're ready to compete with the kid from Florida or Massachusetts or China or Russia.
That's right.
I mean, you're in competition with the whole world.
That's
and
right.
Just because you're succeeding here, but on the other hand, there's one other point I want to make. I taught at one of the worst schools at CCSD, and there are students there that get a great education. They have to be proactive about their own education, though. They have to be searching for help, staying after school, getting involved. And, I think a good school is just someone who keeps their students motivated and they have programs that the kids automatically fall into, whereas a bad school is one where the child needs to be proactive or the parents need to be proactive as an advocate for their education. Because there's great teachers even at the worst schools,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the teacher always makes the biggest difference, right? We have great teachers in this district. We talk about being 49th in the country. That's not a reflection of all the teachers in the district. 100% that's not the case. We know we have great teachers. Unfortunately, if it's not working, then the teacher should have an option too.
Right. Not double down on failing policy.
Absolutely. I mean, teachers can, this is why teachers love going to charter schools and love teaching at private schools, because they also get more choice in doing that and more freedom to do the things that they want to do and teach the way that they want to teach.
Right. I mean, because teachers, I believe, are being incredibly handcuffed in the way they can even teach.
Yeah.
And again, it comes back to the individual. And when somebody says, I want to teach children for a living, they have a plan in their head about what their classroom looks like, about how they're going to teach certain subjects. And then when the curriculum tells you exactly what you're supposed to do and when you're supposed to do it, you end up getting a lot of teachers who simply give out the Chromebooks and give them a Khan Academy video or do this or that because that's what the school is making them do. And I'm sure they didn't invest in their education and dream of being a teacher or a coach in order to just follow the status quo of handing out Chromebooks.
That's right. I think teachers are professionals. We should treat them as professionals, and they should be able to teach and help kids learn and feel good and see the growth. And if that's not happening in the school and the district that they're in, the school that they're in, then they should have the choice to leave as well and go teach somewhere else where they can do that.
Well, the teachers are inundated with things that have nothing to do with teaching children.
Yeah.
Responsibilities. Almost 50% of the time teachers spend at their their craft is not with students.
Yeah.
And I think that's a disservice. And when you have teachers selling their prep period in order to cover another class, that means the students can't come by and eat lunch with that teacher. Some teachers like to do that. Some teachers like to unwind. There's just so much that is expected of teachers, and as our numbers continue to dwindle in the amount of teachers that we have, it's just adding more responsibility. Yet, if a teacher doesn't spend literally months putting together a package of CU credentials in order to qualify for a raise, they won't even get their raise unless they put in that extra 80 hours on their own time, besides lesson plans, professional development, and calling parents in order to, tell them, oh, your child has an F and we have a new law that we have to warn you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest question is, do you as a parent, and I think parents should ask themselves this, do you as a parent want the freedom to choose the education that's best for your child? And if the answer to that question is yes, then we need to make sure this initiative gets on the ballot so that parents can directly vote on whether or not they get to direct their child's education.
And what's the website that?
It's edfreenv.com, and we're on Twitter and Facebook. We don't have a ton of information on that website right now.
We just started.
We just launched it, but we have the ability for elected officials, candidates to pledge support for educational freedom. You can go on there and pledge your support.
As a matter of fact, and something that you guys might want to know about, in 2 weeks, I think it's in 2 weeks, we're going to have gubernatorial candidate Guy Nora joining us. And when I was doing my research, I believe Guy Nora was one of the first people to make a nice sized contribution to your efforts.
He was. He's very supportive of school choice. I know it's a big part of his platform. And so he gave $25,000 to our PAC in order to start getting this on the ballot. We have to pay for signatures. I know parents are going to be really motivated. We'll do a lot of grassroots signature gathering. But, at the end of the day, we have to have money to be able to do that. So we've had a lot of really generous people come forward and donate. And Guy Nora was one of the very first people to do that. We're super grateful to him.
And was that edfreenv.com?
That's exactly right.
Good. I just wanted to make
That's
sure
exactly
you guys
right.
all have that information. Where else can we find out about Power2Parent?
So Power2Parent, we have power2parent.org on our website, Power2Parent on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're pretty much everywhere. But we would encourage parents to join the union. And the reason we want parents to join our union is because we're building this army of parents that can really stand up to these policies and the unions who are circumventing parents and the policies that are circumventing parents. And we have to have numbers to do that. So it's $25 a year for a family to join the union. It's not very much money.
And when you
at
say
all.
union, you mean the Power2Parent
The
union.
Power2Parent union. That's
Gotcha.
right, because we want a parent union that can represent the voice of parents and help we train parents, we help parents advocate for their kids, and ultimately that's how we're going to get through this really difficult time and get parents more choice and help our kids really start to learn and be educated and have a free and fair society moving forward.
Right. Well, I'm thrilled that you were able to come down at the last minute, no less. We've been trying to get you for so long, and I knew it would be great. I realized at the time we didn't even talk about everything I wanted to talk about, but I'm hoping you'll come back. And I know you guys know that we have Charlie will be coming in 3 weeks, I believe. I hope she's feeling better really soon. If you didn't catch last night's episode, we had Sigal Chadha on. And so make sure you check that out if you didn't see it. She's one of the Republican candidates for Attorney General here in Nevada. And we will continue to be covering education and conservative politics as we approach Election Day here in Nevada. And thank you so much for joining us. The singular thing I need you guys to do is hit that subscribe button so that way you get notified. And every time we go live, you'll be able to join us on the air. And you'll get to know every time we have one of these great candidates or great community service members such as Erin right here on the show. We're also on Facebook, The Johnny Brew Show. You can check out thejohnnybrewshow.com. We also have Common Sense Nevada, the public square. And while I'm at it, I might as well tell you, we also have the new CCSD Board of Trustees 22 and 24. So if you're a candidate for school board trustee or you're going to be voting, which, I hope you are, you'll be able to find out about all the candidates on that site. And finally, anytime you want to get in touch with us, you could always throw us a text, 702-501-5304, or email us at thejohnnybrewshow.com. Thanks for listening to all my plugs. You got anything else you want to plug? Since I did like 12 things. I only gave you 2. So
I'm
you got
good.
one more?
I want people to go to my website, follow me on Facebook, and join the union.
Awesome. That's Power2Parent and edfreenv.com. Thank you very much to Erin Phillips. Get well soon, Charlie. And we will see you guys next time on The Johnny Brew Show.